Throughout mankind, a hero can rise from the ashes of war and tragedy. In ancient Greece, it was warriors like Achilles and Alexander the Great. During the Roman times, gladiators made the Colosseum roar. In the late summer and fall of 1922, a Methodist minister named Asa K. Jennings from upstate New York defied the odds and saved hundreds of thousands of lives in Asia Minor. A person doesn't have to wear a cape and fly in the air. Very often a hero is just someone that does the right thing. It's so simple to do, but in the story that is Smyrna, very few officials did the right thing.
So the situation at Smyrna in many ways is duplicated to the south and to the north. People had to be rescued. And so the same approach was applied. American naval escort of Greek shipping. So the Greek ships would come in under U.S. escort, the refugees would be loaded and they would be taken to Mytilene principally. And then from there they were dispersed to other places, Piraeus and Thessaloniki and so forth. And the same thing along the Black Sea coast, deployed even passenger ships, big passenger ships, Greek passenger ships were used, and under the direction of Powell and Jennings, the people were brought from the Black Sea to Constantinople and then to Greece. When it was all done, the patriarch in Constantinople credited Asa Jennings with saving the lives of millions of Greeks. So he's a hero. He's a hero to Americans and he's a hero to the Greeks, I think. So let me tell you about Asa Jennings. Asa Jennings was an employee of the YMCA, the Young Men's Christian Association. It was a missionary organization in those years, very active in Europe following World War I. He had been in Czechoslovakia, the new nation of Czechoslovakia, and was transferred to Smyrna to work with boys in a summer camp on athletic programs and so forth. He had never been to Smyrna, had never been to that part of the world before, but he was very eager to go there. He was a religious, very pious man. He was very interested in the Holy Land, you know, the lands of the Bible and so forth. And of course, Smyrna figures very importantly into the Bible, into the New Testament, into early Christianity and so forth.
Asa Jennings was a man of deep faith. He grew up in upstate New York in the 1870s, 1880s. Became a Methodist minister and was very active in the young nascent movement known as the Young Men's Christian Association, YMCA. YMCA was definitely a Christian organization. It was also an organization, though, that had a social consciousness as well as interested in spreading the gospel message.
And my grandfather had great faith, and when he contracted that Pott's disease, 35 doctors examined him and they all said he would live a few weeks and die. No doctor said he would survive. They all said he would die. And when my grandmother was given that news, she went home that night crying, upset, and she said she opened the Bible at random. If you believe in God and have faith, this is not random, it's the providence of God. And she opened to John 11:4, which says, "You shall not die of this disease, but is to honor God and the Son of God."
In his early 20s, Asa Jennings became ill. And as he lays in a hospital bed, the story is told that his wife opens the gospel and turns to the 11th chapter of the Gospel of John, which talks about the death and eventual resurrection of Lazarus. And in one of the verses there, I think it's verse 4, Jesus mentions that, listen, this illness or this death is not for naught. That is to say that this has happened because, and he's talking about Lazarus, this has happened so that the greater glory of God can be revealed. As his wife reads that, she thinks, and Asa thinks, that perhaps his life may have some meaning later on. That is to say that, yes, he has illness. It was Pott's disease. It was a muscular kind of disease. And maybe this illness will serve some purpose. Little did they know that a few decades later, he would be in the midst of saving thousands of lives.
So with this good news, she went to the hospital and told my grandfather the good news. And she was shocked that he was not upset that he'd received a death sentence. He said very calmly, I'm not going to die because I have a great mission to accomplish. And besides, I want to go to Jerusalem. Now, in his whole life, the greatest distance he'd ever traveled was Utica, New York to Rochester, which is not very far. But on his deathbed, he's going to Jerusalem. I mean, it's like unbelievable. Now, he didn't know what the mission was, but September 20th, 1922, we found out.
He used his house to help the minorities, but also he rented a house, by the K, and then he would go around and pick up the orphans, the pregnant women, and take them to this house. Another thing he did, he took the other house too, and he put the American flag in front of the building so that they will not be touched by the Turkish people. At the beginning it was okay, but at the end, when the fire started, burning the whole city, the Turkish people didn't care. The Turkish soldiers did not care if you were an American or Italian, and they were trying to clean up everything, all the people that were not Muslims in Turkey. But he did spend his own money to help the poor people and the orphans, and that's admirable.
Uncontrollable desire to save the lives of the people who had come under his protection. There were about 2,000 of them now, women and children, spread among a number of safe houses at the north end of the quay. In the 2 weeks since, the relief committee had relegated him to messenger boy status. Jennings had pulled women from the streets where some had begun to give birth and others from the water where they had tried to drown themselves. He watched refugees being beaten and shot and carried off to be raped.
There were over 200,000 people left in Smyrna at the mercy of the fire and the Turkish nationalists and the irregulars. There was a huge vacuum of power in the city. And as happens often in dramatic historical moments, ordinary people step into that vacuum and become heroes.
He had great faith. He believed in God. He believed in the mission of God. That's it. He had faith. And if you look at his whole life, it was all based on faith. And when he was in the middle of the rescue, and he was going to Middling, and these people kissed my hands and clothing, and many grabbed me and fell to my feet and kissed my shoes. And then he later, as I mentioned, got into his room, and he said he fell to his knees and he cried. He was so emotionally overcome. And then, now, the lives of those people are his responsibility. I have depended on the Lord all my life, and never did I throw myself so completely on him as during those days. He was, God, stick with me. I need you right now. Speaking to the Lord our Master. He had great faith. And that's what his whole life was dictated. It wasn't marriage and kids and going to a Little League game. It was human life.
It's a reminder for us, as we look back in history, that an individual who was doing good work, but had no particularly official role, with any government, how he stood up and answered the call, the humanitarian call, to save the lives of thousands of people. And we're reminded today that all of us, as we think about ever being in a situation where there's a crisis unfolding, that we stand up and that we assist the humanitarian crisis that is unfolding in front of us, and it seem to unfold in the 21st century constantly. Historians, as they have gone back over the 100 years and looked back at the events of Smyrna in 1922, have clearly identified Asa Jennings as one of the great individuals that stood up and worked tirelessly for the betterment and the salvation, literally physical salvation, of tens of thousands of people in Smyrna. And he is rightly remembered as a hero.